But we will start with the Toronto Maple Leafs, who are now 6-0-1 in their last 7 games. That slump feels like years ago, and they're right back where they need to be, firmly in first position in the North Division. Max, 2 games that we caught since the last podcast. What are your big thoughts about the Leafs, who are back on fire, my friend?
Yeah, statistically, looking just at games one, back on fire, maybe not the most satisfying wins you're going to see over our last two, but 4 points, 4 points, and there's definitely a lot of positives you can take away from these last two. I thought the Leafs Jets game probably a preview of what to come as we get closer down the stretch, and especially for the playoffs, a very tight game, low action for most of it, hard to get a ton of offense going, but they stuck in there defensively, and Campbell had another great game and almost a monkey off the back, or reassuring to see we can get some points in shootout, which may come in handy down the stretch, though disappointed to see the 3-on-3 streak end. And then this Leafs Flames game, I didn't catch all of it. I actually just caught the last 10 minutes of the third period once the Leafs were up 4-2. So I hear it was a bit of a snoozer in the first two. Definitely not the Leafs' best hockey, and more maybe to dump on the Flames than praise the Leafs in this one. But I'll get into that when we wrap up our Leafs talk. How do you feel about how the weekend went?
I will never ever complain about a win. And even if there are some things that I'd like to see change, I'm always going to lead it off with happy thoughts, right? You can never ever complain about a win. And I agree. So I watched most of the first 2 periods. So together we kind of caught that whole Toronto Calgary game. But what I'm seeing is it's people might be complaining about the lack of like action, but that's kind of what you want out of this Leafs team, is you want them to learn how to play different styles, because over the last couple of years, they have been the team that has just been chaos and all over the place. And it's going to be a ton of goals both ways. And if this is a team that can actually play with more defensive responsibility, as we've seen this season, they slow down the pace, they reduce high danger chances, then they will end up having the top end talent that should win out in tighter games. And that's at least what you would hope. So I don't mind the snooze fests if it's the Leafs are playing sound defensive hockey. Um, on the other side, the Flames, they had like some semblance of momentum when Mangiapane scored right before the end of that first period, and then they just came out so flat. And I don't know. I just there's so much that's happened to this team, and the coaching changes and the response to Sutter, and I don't know if he's going to be the answer, but their guys are on the move at the end of the season for sure. Something has to be changed, because they came out and Tavares had a squeaker of a goal, and that completely changed all the momentum. And the Leafs kind of dominated the first 15 minutes of that third period, in my opinion. But uh, yeah,
Yeah.
again, not much to say. The
Well, what
Flames struggled.
watching that third period, I kind of flashed back to earlier, a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, when I was watching the Flames and Senators through a triple header. And it was they had a very similar game where they were up 1-0 going into the third against the Sens, and then the Sens came back, tied it up, took the lead, and you just saw no urgency from the Flames in the third period. And at times in this third period against the Leafs, it looked like the Leafs were in practice. Honestly, they were taking the puck up through the neutral zone and with such a casual breakout pace, not maybe the most dangerous scoring chances generated on that breakout, but a lot of clean passes, easy entries, not having to hustle too hard on the forecheck, but still getting back with plenty of time to spare defensively. And then, like you said, the first 15 minutes of that third period, probably all Leafs. The last 3 minutes, they get their goalie pulled, but it's just a perimeter show. The puck never really made it into the slot in that 6-on-5, despite a lot of possession in the Calgary time. And if we want to praise the Leafs, we can say they did a pretty effective job there. I liked there were no real breakdowns in their 5-man coverage against that extra man attack, but the Flames just they have to find a way to generate some scoring chances in those late game opportunities. So I was thinking, like, man, they had this breakdown against the Leafs tonight where they got outscored in the third period. I was flashing back to that Ottawa series. So I dug a little further, and in their last 10 games, which I guess is Daryl Sutter's first 10 games with the team, they've been outscored 13-7 in the third period. They've outscored teams in the third period just twice in those 10 games, and they have a 2-8 record. And 4 of those 10 games, they've directly lost in the third period. And that was what I saw when I said after that Ottawa game, the Calgary Flames playoff hopes are zero. And I saw just no way in for them. And I realized they still have 5 games left against the Habs. So statistically, there's a chance you get 10 points and you hold the Habs off for 10 points. But this team that loses almost every third period they play, even if they can pick up 1 or 2, you feel like with the lack of urgency they have down the stretch, the Habs are just going to beat them like 4 times out of 5, I'd say. Let's see if that holds up.
Yeah, definitely excited to watch the end of that. Another thing that I was really happy about in this game was Gouch getting his first
Yes.
goal as a member of the Leafs. He hit a post in their game against the Jets on Friday night and has been all around the net. He finally gets one on a rather gorgeous play. Nylander, a low shot. Tavares receives it and just touches it across the crease. And Gouch gets a pretty easy one, but he still, you got to put it away. And he did so. And yeah, just happy for him to get one to validate all the effort he's been putting in so far on that second line. Really enjoyed the effort. And Michael Hutchinson, after we said that he may never start for the Leafs again in that dreadful pulling, I think it was against Ottawa,
Mm-hmm.
and he now in his last 2 starts has been really solid. And he still is a guy who's a bit scrambly in the net, and you're never going to be 100% comfortable with him back there. But again, he puts the team in a place to win in 2 starts in a row, and is making his way back into the good graces of Leafs fans, because obviously, I guess the Leafs are not too confident in Bevelainen yet to throw him in. So it's still Hutch and Campbell for now, getting the rotation. And if Hutch can continue to play like this, then we can continue to pick up wins. I still think they need to address the goaltending situation. I don't want to have Hutch in a playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, you hope every game Hutch starts is a game or a day, 2 days that much closer to Freddie Anderson being able to get healthy and get back in there. And as long as they're playing well, there's no rush, which you have to think he was starting and playing just for lack of any other option. And then as soon as Campbell's health picked up to the point where he could start consistently as it has, Anderson hasn't even been on the bench since. So you've got to think Freddie was playing through some stuff based on how long we're seeing him out for and how pulled they are. So maybe we have to take that into consideration when we assess his last few performances before his absence. And you hope that he's just going to be 100% when he gets back in there. I still have those same reservations you're saying about Hutch, but you've got to praise it when you see it, and praiseworthy performance tonight for sure.
Another reason why I don't mind the snooze fest is because if we're running our backup goalie out there, you just want to limit the amount of chances he's getting against him, and reduce that variability. So well done by the Leafs. And they get their first shootout win of the season on Friday. Jason Spezza with a very nice one after he tamed the bouncing puck, able to go backhand forehand. Campbell shuts the door. Not much to say about that one. I guess the last thing I want to get to about the Leafs would be the power play. And I already touched about it a ton on Friday, but it continues to struggle. And they had a 4-on-3 in overtime against the Jets. And didn't generate a ton in this game last night, but just they continue to have struggles, and I don't know what the fix is. But I was wondering, Max, if you had any more thoughts on the power play that we hadn't covered.
No, I have in the notes. I don't remember if it was on the 4-on-3 or earlier in the game. I remember Nylander having a one-timer that the power play set up beautifully, and there was another moment where you hold your breath, you hope. Nylander got it on net, but not at his top shelf best, where if he had been, that goes in, and that just goes to the importance of momentum and the difficulties when your power play's in a slump. I think the Leafs at their best, that goal goes in 8, 9 times out of 10. And right now it feels like 2, 3 times out of 10. So you've just got to keep at it. And eventually one of those is going to go in. And then hopefully that generates some momentum and gets going. There's still plenty of the season to work it out. So as long as they stay on top of the division and as long as it's solved come playoff time, bear with it and suffer through the struggles right now.
Definitely. All right, we will switch gears and move on to another couple of teams in the Canadian division. I guess we'll talk briefly about the Ottawa Senators beating the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday to break up their little mini run that they were on. A 6-3 game. Jesperi Kotkaniemi was not happy. There's a clip of him getting off one of his shifts and just breaking his stick into like 4 separate pieces on the bench. His teammate there sitting, you just see the second smash and the teammate goes, just, and sorry for the podcast listeners, I just slid my chair into the desk, but he jumps away with fright. Yeah, the Habs, no, there's a lot of pressure on them from the fan base, from the coaching staff, from ownership, that this is a great opportunity for them to do something. And so they have the pressure on them every game because they sit in that final playoff spot. And so every game means something down the final stretch of the season. And as you can see, I guess the players are really feeling it.
Yeah, I really do feel like the 4 teams are locked at this point. It would take both a spectacular collapse and spectacular upwards effort from the Canucks or the Flames, which I just don't see happening for anything to shift in the playoffs. It's kind of just a question of who's going to be matched up against who. And even then, there's no easy answers. Like you might have teams feeling like they'd rather be against the Oilers, or excuse me, the Jets, the Leafs, or the Oilers, depending if you're the Habs. So I think it's more about getting your game to the highest level it can be than who you're going to be matched up in the playoffs against necessarily. But yeah, we'll see how they bounce back. I'm really going to have my eyes on that Calgary Montreal 5 games that I outlined earlier. That I think is going to be really close to playoff hockey in Montreal with the pressure you're speaking about. That's where they're going to have to put out their best, and it'll be interesting to see how they do it.
I would say the other way that you could possibly see one of those 4 teams falling out is if they are experiencing what the Vancouver Canucks are going through right now. And this is a team now, it's a scary situation. Over half of the players are confirmed. I guess that they have contracted COVID-19. Really scary stuff. I, it was bound to happen. We've seen a couple of other teams in other leagues experience this, but this is definitely the largest. I guess you could compare it to the Dallas Stars, but largest kind of in-season scare in the NHL. And the North Division had done relatively well staying away from it, but this is a big, uh, I guess, obstacle for the league to overcome. And when Vancouver is finally back and ready to go, they're going to have to play a ton of games and a ton of nights with guys who are still recovering from a respiratory illness. Uh, I just feel like they're going to fall off the table. And if another team was to, God forbid, have a similar situation, you could see a similar thing happening. So hoping that all the players and teams stay safe and that Vancouver can get through this and hopefully figure out a way to get their team back on the ice when everyone is through the protocols. But yeah, definitely there will be a thorough look through to see how this came about and what the cause was, because it is a pretty big event that happened.
Yeah, I mean, we saw it play out with Montreal, I think, having 2 players test positive, and it seemed like the wind was blowing the same way at first, with 2 players on the Canucks being announced, and I thought the protocol was putting it off for a few extra days, to be honest. But then the contact tracing started coming through, and the eyebrows just keep raising, and you feel like half the time when a professional athlete announces they have COVID, you're hearing some kind of horror story from it. In the UFC world, for example, the featherweight champ Alexander Volkanovski flies into Las Vegas 1 week away from his title defense, feeling fine, gets told he has COVID, and then kind of falls off the radar for a couple weeks. And then you just heard him say recently, like, feeling fine now, but COVID's no jokes, folks. That was scary. So you've got to think, with that many players on the Canucks positive, there's going to be at least a few guys held back. And if it's someone like a Quinn Hughes, who I know has it, any one of their key pieces is going to be so detrimental. I mean, the playoff hopes weren't abundant in the first place, but this seems like a rather unfortunate nail in the coffin, and for sure some team investigation necessary. I don't know, if I think I heard it's a variant, so maybe one of the ones that spreads more easily, but scary situation all around.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned Volkanovski. I don't know if he's going to be part of your combat corner, but that is where we are headed next. So we will take a quick break and be back
There's the
shortly.
smoothness of those transitions back.